Okay, so welcome Denai Moore to our 50 years of Glastonbury, 50 years of Greenpeace virtual festival. How are you doing? I feel like it's a very loaded question at this time.
Yeah, it's just been such a crazy year so far. Like, it's hard to believe that it's only been 6 months because it just feels like it's been, going on for an eternity. But I think it's kind of, I don't know, I think at the moment it's really nice to see people sharing each other's work and kind of just encouraging corporations or different brands or companies to kind of speak up and be more inclusive and change the structures in their own spaces. And I think it's really nice to have a conversation without I don't know, to like listen and to actually just hear how other people feel and vice versa about things happening without it being like this word agenda. I think there's been like a really nice even though everything with the protests and stuff has stoked so many fires, it's nice to have these conversations even if they're uncomfortable.
Absolutely. I think that level of openness is so integral to progress with what's been going on with Black Lives Matter and all the recent events. And then, of course, it all being set within this global pandemic as well. And this has been such a year of challenge. But I think that the openness that you were talking about, the willingness to listen and understand that that's the only way we can move forward is just so important. It's strange for me to be interviewing at this time with everything that's gone on and not touch on how mad this year has obviously become, with the injustice obviously going back years and years and years, but this movement particularly. I wanted to talk to you then about Modern Dread, because even the title of it just seems to really encapsulate so much of what is going on at the moment. So it's out on the 3rd of July. I feel as though you've poured every fibre of your being into it. How do you feel now it's just about to be released?
It feels a bit strange to be releasing it in this time, with the pandemic and everything that's happening. It's almost surreal how fitting the title and a lot of the themes are from this album. And I mean, that kind of stuff for me was definitely not planned or anything. But I do think it's the reason why I called it Modern Dread. It's because I think it's something that we're all feeling, this like anxiety for existing and being online and understanding what your platform is and how we interact and receive information and all this news is very, like, it's heavy, it wears on you. And I think we've all, especially now since the world has kind of stopped and we're kind of working a lot more from home, I think we feel it a lot more because we don't really have those, things that we do in our lives as the kind of anecdote or not necessarily distraction, but even just things in the way we work that takes us away from all the news and stuff that's happening. So it just feels like we're just being presented almost relentlessly with all this information and just really bizarre, things that are happening. So I think to me, that's why I named it that, because I knew that's what I was feeling when I wrote a lot of these songs. I felt this anxiousness and this dread about our future and about myself and my place in the world. And it's something I've written about on my last record as well, kind of more vaguely, but there's I really wanted to present that in the music and the production and in the way I wanted the songs to feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I totally agree. There's been no respite almost. There's been nowhere to distract yourself into. There's been very little escapism. I think Netflix can only do so much in that way, and should we even try and escape into it anyway, or is there a way of trying to absorb all this information and put something positive out there that's going to hopefully take us through and create a better world out of it? It's a lot to get one's head around, though. I think
but I think it's been really amazing to see how people have been using their platforms and have to step back even from using their platforms and from posting their normal work and actually just reassessing the structures that are in place. And I think it's really amazing to see how, you know, we're experiencing something that feels like quite post-capitalism, and the structure that's in place that has always been in place is kind of collapsing in front of us, and it's really strange. It feels like we're in this weird dystopian film. But I think the balance is necessary. I think for me, especially, like, painting has been my anecdote and has been something that has taken my mind away from it, because I think it is also important to you know, not be too hard on yourself in that sense, and give yourself a break from everything, just to have a balance.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you've been painting your house, have you? Did you say? Yeah, doing some renovations. I 100% agree. To channel that energy into something that's quite far removed from everything that's going on is just so important. Quite a difficult pursuit. Also, I think it's incredible that this year has shown us that almost anything is possible. The unthinkable is impossible, and yet we have adapted to it somewhat. And something really, I think, positive and beautiful can come out of it, of course, environmentally, social change. But I think realizing that we can actually come together and create a new way for us as a humanity.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful, actually, especially to show when the concept of, you know, people that are not necessarily affected by racism firsthand, you know, are just as vocal, are just as loud, are protesting, and, you know, it's important, and it shows the importance of those voices as well in a cause like this, you know, to be able to actually protest for something that is not necessarily affecting you personally or hindering you in society. So I think it's amazing to see everything changing, how these, like, petitions that we sign and stuff are actually materializing in some kind of social justice, and things are changing, which is crazy, you know, especially seeing this whole statue kind of thing happen, and statues in different cities are being taken down. I think it feels, I don't know, it feels like a bit surreal, actually, to see how things are kind of rapidly kind of turning on its head. But it's definitely a progression and a step into a kind of, you know, more optimistic future.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. These moments, the statue moments, are obviously so symbolic, and I feel as though it's a rejection of the mentality that just because it was always like that doesn't mean we can't create something new and different now. Thinking about the environment, of course, we're celebrating 50 years of Greenpeace, and I was thinking the other day how quickly those plastic straws, if someone gives you a plastic straw in a bar, when we're able to go back into bars, it's just like, what have you done? You know, how quickly that we can shift is so empowering and incredible, and there's a lot of strength and positivity, I think, that can be drawn from that, from these moments, of course, social inequality and environmentally as well. I think there is a level of optimism that we can maybe obtain from that. Thinking about your single, and listening to you actually talk about Motherless Child, and of course that did make me hone right in on everything going on in America, zoom out to everything going on in America, but then zoom into your own experience of anxiety and depression as well. Can you talk us through its creation? When did you write it? Because of course it's so of the moment.
I wrote it actually a couple years back, and it kind of never really fit on any other project, and I revisited it because I felt like there was something that resonated with modern dread in general, and it kind of worked, and in response to, like, songs that I have on the record, like To the Brink, which is kind of more about environmental global warming kind of aspect of the world, but it kind of felt really timely. And I say this all the time because sometimes songs have a lifespan of their own, and the songs that I've written that doesn't really flesh out or come out until like years and years later.
Mm-hmm.
And this Marvelous Child was definitely one of them, and there was just something so immediate and fresh and timely about it. And yeah, like you said, releasing it now, considering, you know, everything that's happening, feels a little bit surreal, but it shows to me that it's important to write music about what's happening. And, you know, I think that's my intention with Modern Dread, is I feel like we are feeling this dread and this about the world and things that are happening that we want to change, and we want to feel like we can actually be a part of the change that could possibly happen in the future, and it is happening. So yeah, that's kind of where Motherless Child came from.
Yeah. Thinking about the level of vulnerability then, I suppose, because you're so open, which is wonderful and so empowering and comforting for people listening to your music. Thinking about that level of feeling exposed, though, I don't know if that's a feeling that you do feel, actually. I don't put words into your mouth. I was just wondering how you would cope with that almost sort of vulnerability. Would you agree? Or
yeah, I think the vulnerability for me as an artist is, you know, important. It's an important place to go. And when you make a record, it is vulnerable. You're looking at yourself in the mirror because no one else is watching when you're making a record. No one else hears the songs outside of, you know, maybe people, managers or stuff. But even then, I'm very reluctant to share songs in their early stages with even my managers or label. So it is very personal. And I think that's why, for me, a lot of my songs sound so vulnerable and very open to sharing those kind of darker parts of me, or parts of my brain, or things that I feel from the world and things that's happening. Because, you know, I think it's important to you, and it's a place that you go to when you write songs. It's almost like a diary, you know, you just write in to yourself and you kind of document it.
Absolutely. Thinking then, so okay, have you got, oh right, let me phrase this properly. I was just thinking about, you were talking about writing songs and ideas down that maybe don't sort of see the light of day at the time, but then potentially in years to come. Do you have a big catalogue of your experiences that you've written down, or diaries, or little half songs that you just you haven't finished yet, and that you're just going to go back to? And is that how you create?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's quite a few songs that didn't make this album that I feel like I still want to work on. And it's not because I've preferred them to other songs that make the project. It's more like it doesn't feel right for the song just yet. Especially in this time, I've been thinking about this song that I wrote called Disposable, which is kind of weirdly enough about the disposability of, you know, a lot of our lives in society. That feels really strange, but I feel like I might revisit it because of the energy that I wrote it from and kind of what's happening. I feel like it's time for me to revisit that song that I wrote. But yeah, it happens. Yeah, it happens all the time. And sometimes as well, when you're trying to make something, you're not really in the right frame mind to do it as yet. And I feel like Motherless Child was one of those songs. When I wrote it years ago, it was a nice song, and sonically it kind of worked, but for some reason it wasn't right. I knew from hearing it that it wasn't right. So me and Alex started the whole song from scratch for this version of it that's on the album. And then it just kind of clicked and made sense. So yeah, there's quite a few songs that I haven't made yet, or I've written fully and just haven't even recorded or shared it with anyone. But I know that the time will come for it.
So do you approach making music with a level of surrender, in a sense? You've got an idea, maybe you work a little bit, and then you kind of give it up to the universe, as it were?
Yeah, and sometimes as well, songs are just written in the moment, and I feel like they are given to me in a way, the way they come out. Like on the record I have this song called Cascades, which I thought the album was done, and then I just kind of wrote this song one day, and it just made complete sense that it would be on the album. So sometimes songs just come out of the blue and you don't really expect it, and it changes as you write. It changes something in yourself as you're writing it. And I think that's the magic of music, because there's this like, you know, on like predictable element of it where you just don't know where, even when I started Modern Dread, I had no idea where it was going to take me, but you kind of have to follow it and let it, you know, blow out a bit like a storm, maybe.
Yeah.
Or like kind of that's what it feels like to me. It feels like you can, you know, feel everything that's happening, but you have no idea where it's going to take you, or how it will end. And then when it does end, it kind of just makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost like a mutual exchange of energy then. I think you tend to, as an artist, that you're just putting whatever's inside you out in a kind of not simply, but solely cathartic experience. But actually, it sounds like you're saying that artwork almost feeds back into you then, and you develop together throughout its process, which is pretty amazing. Yeah. Looking at, well, the genre-free episode that I listened to with Liliane Lahavis is so brilliant. What prompted you to start these conversations?
I mainly started it because I was kind of just frustrated with being called or cornered into like very specific genres that I feel like are very, I don't know, lazily thrown at Black and brown artists in this industry. And I did it because I recognized, or just I would have conversation with friends and recognize a similar, you know, place of like, they're in this place, they're being either boxed in by the industry that they're in, by label, or just putting out music and then it being reduced to like R&B or other genres. And I think it's interesting as well, talking about that, how, for instance, the Grammys recently have taken out, they're going to change the name of the urban contemporary genre. There's just certain bits of language and that is used around Black artists that to me are very reductive in terms of just people are so eclectic, a bit like Sims. Like Little Sims last record is very like, it's so broad, it touches on so many different elements. There's a very like alternative, almost band feel to a lot of the stuff, and I feel like at the end of the day they're still going to call her a rapper, you know. Absolutely. And there's something to me that it's like, what, but she's on stage, she's playing like guitar and, you know, singing, and yeah, she raps, but there's so much more happening sonically that I'm like, it's very frustrating for me as an artist for that to happen, especially because I don't make music thinking about any genre at all. I just make sounds that feel very authentic to me, and a lot of them lend from so many different genres that it almost feels like people didn't even listen to it. It's like, did you actually listen to it? Because it's not an R&B
listen
song.
Again, go back. I can totally understand your frustration and share your frustration myself as well. As a presenter, I've been told I'm not urban enough, which is just utterly, I mean, you know, I've been told, I'm not urban enough. Even my agent repeated that. My agent at the time actually repeated it, and that the person had given that feedback who had, you know, given me an audition, and she didn't even see the problems with saying someone's not urban enough. As you say, the laziness, the compulsion to put people in boxes. I think as well, there's this quickness, you know, as you say, have you even listened? Have you even tried to get to know me? Not urban enough. This is what I want. I'll look at her colour. She'll be urban. We'll put her in, you know. And then, I don't know, they met me and decided that I wasn't actually what they were looking for based on maybe the way I sounded, I guess. It's so frustrating, as you say. I mean, where do you think that compulsion to put art in boxes comes from then?
I just feel like it's lazy. And I think it's interesting as well, like FKA Twigs talks about this very early in her career, that, you know, before any press images of her appeared, people were like talking about her music in a way that was almost like, you know, oh, it's so experimental. There are all these like, you know, it's so, you know, electronic influences, and, you know, it's got this kind of like, you know, all these different things. And then she was like, as soon as she released a, you know, image of herself, then people called it like, oh, like it's alt R&B. It has to be something, and then R&B. Like that's what's. So it's, to me, it's, I just think it's a little bit lazy, and, you know, it's a visual thing. You know, if you look and present yourself in a certain way, not even present yourself, but if you look, you know, the way you are, if you're brown or black, people might already project a sound onto you, or have this, you know, image, or like certain vernacular of what they expect you to even speak like, to sound like. So I think it is just lazy. that's
break it down. I wonder how we can work to dispel all of that, because it's just feels,
I think moving in a good direction, because the fact that, like you're saying, even the word urban, I know like a few labels have said, you know, they're taking out that as a category in terms of the way they've labeled artists on their albums. And then yeah, the Grammys, I mean, even though they've said they're going to change it to progressive R&B, which I think is like just a little bit ridiculous. But I think the conversation of it being changed, because urban contemporary to me was always like, what does that even mean? That doesn't mean anything, you know. That's just, I feel like we know what it means, and people have spoken up, like Tyler the Creator spoken about it last year after he won, and felt very unsettled in the fact that his Grammy came from urban contemporary as a category. But I think, you know, artists literally you know, talking about genre, like Moses Sumney talks about it quite a lot, and quite a few other people, and just continuing to make art and just being authentic to themselves, I think is the way to progress and move forward, and to just make the music that you want to, and not feel, you know, defeated by, you know, press and what people say or what people try and categorize you as. I think is the best way to move forward. And that's what I try to do. I always try to make music that feels authentic to me, and, you know, feel validated in the spaces around me. I think I'm very lucky to have two very amazing managers that understand me and see me and allow me to make the music that I want to, and defend me when I'm challenged on it.
Nice. Yeah. And turn the volume down on all the nonsense, you know. It's such an important pursuit for all of us to work out the stuff that we can change and challenge, like you said, and then just fade a lot of the rubbish out as well. It's tough because there is so much. I mean, our identities are so complex. There's so many different sides of us, and they should all be celebrated. And it does feel very frustrating when one's identity is just, as you say, reduced to one word. Oh, that's who I am. And also you've talked about development and the fact that your songs give back to you whilst you give to them, and it just completely negates that whole incredible musical process. And I guess you must start a song, I would think, as you say, you've not known where you're going to go with it, but someone's already decided who's going to write about that song in 6 months that it is R&B, just because of your colour, I guess.
Yeah, it's just insane. Yeah, it's just a little bit insane. That's probably why I kind of like awards like the Mercury Prize, because I mean, there is no genre. It's literally just one award, you know, and anyone can win and anyone is nominated within it. And, you know, we've seen so many, you know, there's been so many eclectic artists that have won that award over the years. And I feel like it's a step in the right direction that the Grammys, I mean, they still need to just basically get rid of the category altogether. But, you know, the fact of reassessing the word urban and why people use it and why it's used in the industry, I think that's a good step.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I was watching a moment where you're recording the album, and is it the guitarist or is it the musician? What does Rick play? Trumpet. And you were just watching him play, and he was in the zone, and then he finished, and you, all three of you, I think, were just like, shh, sugar, let's say. What was that moment? How can you put it into words? And is that the reason? Is that the sort of the moment that propels you to carry on in music?
Yeah, I mean, for me, making the record, being in the studio is where I progress the most as an artist, because there's no one watching. So it's very much a continuous like self-analysis, and I'm having to live with it. I go to sleep and I think about the record. I go for a run and I listen to, you know, an early version of songs, and until it's kind of finished. And for me, making a record is fun in that sense, because you go to this childlike state of mind where anything feels possible, and you kind of are bouncing back ideas, and you're kind of lending so much on your imagination that it feels like magic. So a lot of those moments is kind of what making a record is like. You're in the studio, and you know, some days it's really hard, and some days you have, you know, great musicians come down and you play around, and it just fits perfectly for that song. And that was that moment, you know. It's crazy because at the time, me and Alex, who's guitarist from Everything, made the album together in like a pretty small studio. So when we went out to Banbury, which is the studio that's in that footage, and had all these possibilities and all these other musicians come down, it was just really exciting. It was just like really exciting to be able to do anything and capture any kind of sound. Yeah.
It was really lovely to see it, because it was just like the coming together of so many elements, and almost implied that there'd been such a journey up until that point, and it was just a moment in the studio, and it was lovely that actually that was captured on film as well. It's been so lovely chatting to you. Thanks so much. So all the very best for the album. I'm looking forward to your performance at Greenpeace, Action All Areas, and all the best for everything coming up. Nice to chat.
Thank you.